You finally got the raise you worked for. The number in your bank account is higher than it's ever been. But somehow it doesn't feel like progress. You thought more money would bring peace, but instead it brought a new kind of noise, a heavier silence, a deeper worry that no one else seems to talk about. You still wake up with that quiet panic. Bills are paid, the car is new, the house looks fine. And yet, there's that same emptiness sitting at the edge of your mind, whispering, why does it still not feel enough? Over a century ago, an economist named Thorstein Veblen saw this coming. He said the moment we started measuring our worth by how we looked to others, we built a system where freedom became another word for status, where the more we earn, the poorer we feel. This isn't a story about money. It's a story about the invisible chains hidden inside our desire to be seen. And tonight, we'll break them apart. It's strange, isn't it? You earn more than you ever have, but somehow it still feels tight. You buy better clothes, a better car, maybe a better house, and yet the comfort you expected never fully arrives. Every raise buys a few weeks of pride, then turns into a new list of things you suddenly need. You tell yourself this is growth. You remind yourself that your father worked harder for less, that you've climbed further than most people from where you started. And still, when the day ends, there's that quiet pressure sitting in your chest, the sense that you're late to something you can't name. You scroll through your phone at midnight. Someone your age just bought a lake house. Another friend invested in a business. Another retired early. You should feel inspired, but instead, you feel smaller. It's not jealousy, it's exhaustion. A sense that no matter how hard you run, you're never actually catching up. Sociologists have seen this for decades. We make more, we own more, we consume more, but our peace of mind hasn't grown at all. In fact, it's shrinking. We live in bigger houses, yet feel increasingly trapped inside them. We have faster connections, but lonelier conversations. We work smarter, but sleep worse. The data only confirms what you already feel in your bones. Something in this system steals the joy of progress. Psychologists call it the relative deprivation trap. It means happiness doesn't depend on what you have, but on how what you have compares to what others display. The more you look around, the poorer you feel. And in a world built on visibility, there's no ceiling to comparison. Maybe you're not broken. Maybe the system is built to keep you striving, a structure that feeds on your effort, rewarding you just enough to keep you running. To understand how it began, how ambition quietly turned into anxiety, we need to return to the thinker who mapped this long before it had a name. Thorstein Veblen, the man who exposed the hidden machinery of status. To understand why success so often feels empty, we need to return to the man who first exposed the strange logic behind it. His name was Thorstein Veblen. Veblen wasn't born into privilege. He grew up in rural Wisconsin, the son of Norwegian immigrants who lived by hard work and silence. He watched his father labor from dawn till night and saw how men like him, honest, disciplined, and productive, were admired in words but ignored in value. Meanwhile, those who owned more and worked less were treated with awe. Even as a child, he sensed something inverted in the moral order of the world. When he entered academia, he wasn't drawn to profit or markets. He was drawn to motives, why we do what we do and why comfort never feels final. He noticed that people didn't just want to live well. They wanted to appear as though they were living better than others. And so he began to study wealth not as economics, but as psychology performed in public. In 1899, he published The Theory of the Leisure Class. It looked like a book about money, but it was really a diagnosis of culture. He wrote that modern society had replaced need with display, that we spend not to survive, but to signify. He called it conspicuous consumption, the act of using objects to broadcast our rank, to translate wealth into visibility. A home becomes a signal. A vacation becomes a statement. Even leisure itself becomes a form of labor, the labor of being seen. And what Veblen discovered was unsettling. When society begins to reward appearance, every class starts imitating the one above it. The poor mimic the middle mimic the rich, and the rich invent new ways to stay ahead. It never ends. This, Veblen warned, is how progress turns into performance, how competition disguises itself as taste. He wasn't condemning the rich. He was describing all of us, trapped in a hierarchy of symbols, mistaking display for dignity. And that's where the paradox begins. Veblen believed that the roots of this paradox lived inside small, invisible rituals of everyday life. He called them the mechanisms of display, and he saw 5 of them repeating through every generation. They are not just about money. They are about meaning, how we prove our worth in a world that no longer knows how to measure it. The first was what he called conspicuous leisure. It was the habit of turning time into a symbol of power. In ancient societies, the noble class proved superiority by not working. Labor meant necessity. Leisure meant freedom from necessity. So when the rich were idle, they were not being lazy. They were performing privilege. They showed that their existence was worth more than their effort. In today's world, this idea hasn't vanished. It just changed form. We still use time as a signal. The influencer who posts about escaping the office, the executive who flies to Bali to disconnect, the professional who boasts about freedom from meetings, they are all part of the same play. Leisure is no longer rest. It is a product to be displayed. The cruel twist is that most people now buy leisure with the very work that robs them of it. They spend years trading hours for income, and then use that income to purchase the illusion of time. We end up paying to rest. We sacrifice peace to perform peace, and we mistake exhaustion for achievement. The second mechanism was conspicuous consumption. It is the most famous, the most visible, and the easiest to deny. To Veblen, consumption was no longer about utility. It was a language of hierarchy. Every object said something about its owner. The more expensive, the louder it spoke. A coat wasn't warmth, it was identity. A house wasn't shelter, it was a sentence in the story of who you wanted to be. The car, the brand, the vacation, the phone, none of them exist just to serve you. They exist to serve your visibility. The deeper tragedy is that we rarely consume for ourselves. We consume for the imagined audience in our heads. Every purchase is a whisper. See me, I belong. We buy to belong, but belonging never lasts. There is always another model, another season, another subtle signal that what you own is already behind. So we chase again. The store becomes the church. The receipt becomes the confession. And every transaction buys us another month of social grace before the void returns. The third mechanism was what Veblen called pecuniary emulation, the endless imitation of those just above us. He noticed that status works like gravity. Every layer of society pulls the next one upward. When the upper class raises its standard of living, the middle class follows. When the middle rises, the lower imitates. Each tries to catch up, but no one ever truly does because the standard keeps shifting. Economists later called it the status treadmill. Psychologists called it the hedonic treadmill. Veblen saw it first. He realized that as soon as comfort becomes relative, satisfaction disappears. Your salary goes up, but your sense of enough moves higher too. You're no longer earning to live, you're earning to maintain position. You're running faster just to stay in place. The paradox of progress is that every step forward redefines the starting line. The fourth mechanism was the pecuniary standard of living and the canons of taste. Veblen argued that what we call good taste isn't individual preference. It's imitation dressed as refinement. The upper classes set the standards and the rest of society adjusts its desires to match. Even rebellion gets absorbed and sold back to us. Look at minimalism. What began as a rejection of luxury has become luxury itself. Simplicity is now curated, branded, and monetized. Owning less became the new way of showing you have more. We tell ourselves we're simplifying life, but we're really upgrading the aesthetic of restraint. Veblen would have smiled bitterly at this because he saw that taste always serves the same master, status. Even when we believe we've escaped the hierarchy, we're just decorating its walls. The final mechanism he described was what he called survivals, the remnants of old traditions that persist even when their purpose has vanished. Rituals of display outlive the societies that created them. They become habits of culture, things we do without knowing. Why? We dress formally for events that no longer require it. We buy gifts for occasions that lost their meaning. We compete in subtle ways to show refinement, generosity, or sophistication, not because we choose to, but because the structure demands it. Veblen saw that consumer society depends on these survivals. They give people something to perform. They keep the stage lit so the show never ends. And the audience, of course, is us. Together, these mechanisms form the invisible engine of modern life. They turn progress into pressure and freedom into theater. They explain why the man who works hardest feels trapped, why the woman who earns more still feels behind, and why the society that grows richer grows more anxious. Veblen was not simply analyzing behavior. He was diagnosing a civilization addicted to visibility. We think we're making choices, but most of the time, the system is choosing through us. We chase the next signal because we fear disappearing without it. And that, Veblen would say, is the cruelest paradox of all, that in the pursuit of being seen, we lose sight of ourselves. When you see the world through Veblen's eyes, the paradox begins to make sense. It's not that money fails to help us. It's that money lives inside a system designed to erase satisfaction the moment it appears. Every mechanism he described, leisure, consumption, imitation, taste, feeds the same machine. It runs on comparison, and comparison has no finish line. The first reason the paradox happens is that status never stands still. The moment one group moves ahead, the standard shifts with them. A raise that once meant freedom soon becomes the new requirement just to stay level. The goalpost keeps moving quietly, endlessly. We call that progress, but it's really motion without a rival. Economists like Fred Hirsch later called it positional competition, where the value of what you have depends on how few others can have it. Even if everyone becomes richer, no one feels richer because position, not comfort, has become the prize. The second reason lies in what psychologists call visibility bias. We overvalue what can be seen and undervalue what can't. Our attention is drawn to visible success, cars, clothes, travel, but not to invisible stability like peace or health. As economist Ori Heffitz showed, the more visible a form of spending is, the more it influences how we feel about our standing. So we invest in the visible and neglect the internal. The result is a strange emotional poverty. Our lives look full from the outside, yet feel thin from within. The third reason is social amplification. Technology has taken Veblen's theater of display and turned it into a 24-hour broadcast. Social media makes everyone both performer and audience. Every meal, every vacation, every small victory becomes a public announcement of worth. And when the stage never closes, comparison never sleeps. We scroll through other people's highlight reels and call it normal life. It's not envy that drains us, it's the exhaustion of constant self-measurement. The fourth reason is the one Veblen never wrote directly about, but it completes his logic, the inner emptiness that follows when meaning becomes external. When your value depends on being seen, silence feels like death. So you chase attention as if it were oxygen. The more you gain, the less it satisfies, because what you're really craving isn't admiration, it's affirmation. But affirmation from others is borrowed light. It fades the moment they look away. This is why the man who earns more can still feel poorer. It isn't greed, it's gravity, a pull that turns abundance into anxiety the moment abundance becomes relative. You are not running toward success. You are running from invisibility. Veblen understood this long before screens and algorithms made it universal. He saw that a society obsessed with status will always breed insecurity, because the currency of worth is attention, and attention is never enough. That's the true cost of the modern economy. Not inflation, not debt, but the slow erosion of contentment itself. Imagine a man named John. He is 45, married with 2 children and a mortgage. After 15 years of loyalty, he finally gets the promotion. His salary crosses 6 figures. He feels like he's won the game he was raised to play. He buys the car he used to admire at stoplights, upgrades the house, enrolls his children in a private school. For a few months, everything feels right. The fear that haunted him for years begins to fade. Then the bills arrive. The new house brings new taxes. The car brings insurance and maintenance. The school brings endless expectations, fundraisers, uniforms, reputation. And the new role at work brings new pressure to perform, new hours, new standards of living to keep up with. He earns more, but somehow has less. More comfort, less calm. More possessions, less freedom. He bought status, not peace. The promotion didn't liberate him. It locked him into a lifestyle that feeds on his energy to sustain itself. He still posts pictures of family vacations, backyard dinners, and quiet mornings. He smiles in them, but when he looks at those photos later, they feel like evidence of someone who's trying to prove he's fine. He's not failing, he's just tired of chasing an image that keeps moving further away. Now, imagine a woman who makes her living online. Her work is attention. She curates her days, her meals, her outfits, her smiles. Her income depends on visibility, so every moment must be marketable. At first, it feels like freedom. She's her own boss. She controls her schedule. She's admired. But soon, every small decision bends toward the camera. Every trip becomes content. Every friendship a collaboration. Her value exists only while others are watching. And in the silence between posts, she feels it, the slow panic of fading from view. To stay relevant, she must stay performing. She is both the product and the prisoner. Her audience grows, but her peace shrinks. She lives inside the very trap that rewards her. And millions of others watching her through a screen quietly wish they could trade places, not knowing that she would trade anything to step off the stage. This isn't only a personal phenomenon, it scales to the level of institutions. Veblen saw it in the corporations of his own time, and it's even more visible now. A company that once cared about production begins to care more about perception. Profit becomes a performance. The balance sheet becomes an advertisement. More money goes into branding than into innovation. More energy into investor confidence than into the welfare of employees. The business still grows, but inwardly, it hollows out. It becomes a theater where everyone acts successful, while quietly fearing exposure. Even failure has to look polished. The goal is no longer to create real value, but to appear indispensable. The same logic reshapes entire communities. A neighborhood gets labeled as desirable. Prices rise, cafes multiply. The local life that once made it human gets displaced. Visibility alone inflates cost. People who have lived there for decades suddenly feel poorer, not because they've changed, but because their surroundings now speak a different economic language. Status becomes geography, and the map turns into a mirror of hierarchy. In each of these worlds, the home, the feed, the office, the city, the same truth repeats. When visibility defines value, peace becomes a privilege no one can afford. The more a society rewards appearance, the more it empties the people performing it. And the more we rely on others to confirm our worth, the more fragile that worth becomes. Veblen's genius was not just in describing this system, but in predicting how it would evolve. He saw that the hunger for status would not stop at the wealthy. It would become democratic, available to everyone, and therefore inescapable. The tools would change, but the psychology would not. And that's exactly where we are now, a world where almost anyone can display, and almost everyone must. The result is a culture that looks prosperous but feels poor. We are surrounded by more luxury, more convenience, more stimulation than any generation before us. And yet we live with an ache that no purchase can quiet. Because what we're missing is not another upgrade. It's perspective. And to escape this treadmill, we don't need smaller goals. We need a different game. If the system is built to keep us running, the answer isn't to run faster. It's to step outside the race. But that doesn't happen through slogans or temporary experiments. It begins with a different architecture of life. 4 quiet shifts that reorder how we define success itself. The first shift is to change what you measure. Most people chase money as if it were the only unit of progress. But money is just a tool, not the destination. A better question to ask is, what does it buy that truly matters? If the answer is freedom, then start measuring freedom, not wealth. Write down 3 indicators of a life that feels full: time autonomy, personal agency, and creative legacy. Time autonomy is the number of hours each week that belong entirely to you. Agency is the degree to which your decisions aren't dictated by fear. Legacy is the thing you create that will still matter in 5 years. These are not abstract ideals, they are practical metrics. Once you track them, you'll realize how easily money becomes a substitute for meaning, and how little of it you actually need to buy what you thought was priceless. The second shift is what could be called money re-architecture. It's the decision to move your financial energy from conspicuous to inconspicuous goods, from things that display value to things that preserve it. The economist Robert Frank called this the smarter use of wealth. Investing in health, in skills, in relationships, and in optionality. These are invisible assets. They don't shout your worth, but they sustain it. Every dollar that goes into visibility feeds the treadmill. Every dollar that goes into autonomy buys you leverage. You can't outspend a status race, but you can quietly exit it by building a foundation that no one else can compete for. That's the paradox. The less visible your wealth becomes, the stronger it gets. The third shift is to redesign work itself. Most of us were trained to see labor as a way to signal virtue, hard work as a badge of morality. But that's the oldest trap in the system. The point isn't to work harder, it's to build something that continues working when you stop. That doesn't necessarily mean starting a business or chasing passive income. It means shaping your work around creation instead of production. Produce value, not validation. Build something that outlives your attention span. A system, a project, a skill that compounds even when the spotlight moves elsewhere. In a culture obsessed with noise, quiet mastery is rebellion. The fourth shift is environmental. It's about choosing the stage you play on. Because no mindset, however disciplined, can survive in an environment that constantly rewards comparison. Choose communities that measure success differently. Surround yourself with people who value craft over clout, who admire depth more than display. Sometimes that means changing companies. Sometimes it means moving to a smaller town, a slower circle, a quieter digital space. Veblen understood that institutions shape desire and desire shapes destiny. Change the structure and the self begins to follow. Each of these shifts asks for something more than effort. They ask for clarity. They require that you know what game you're actually playing. The culture will still sell you symbols. It will tempt you with every new metric of modern success. Followers, clicks, salaries, rankings. But remember this, Every system built on visibility must keep you unsatisfied to survive. The moment you feel enough, the market loses you. That's why the most radical act in a society built on display is to stop performing. When you stop performing, you don't disappear. You reappear to yourself. You begin to see how much of your stress was borrowed, how much of your ambition was inherited, how much of your time was spent proving what didn't need proof. You start to make decisions not to impress, but to align. That's where real wealth begins. The quiet ownership of your hours, your thoughts, and your direction. Veblen warned that status was a shadow that follows freedom. The brighter the light of progress, the longer the shadow becomes. But if you turn away from the race, not out of apathy, but out of understanding, you begin to see that what you were chasing was never status at all. It was the feeling of being secure in your own worth. And that feeling doesn't need to be seen. It only needs to be lived. Veblen never wrote with the warmth of a preacher. He wrote like a man holding a mirror, and what he showed still stings. His message wasn't about rejecting wealth or comfort. It was about seeing clearly the invisible hand that turns them into tools of control. The system doesn't chain us with poverty anymore. It chains us with comparison. And the more connected the world becomes, the tighter those chains grow. But freedom was never about rejecting society. It's about understanding it deeply enough that you can stand within it without being owned by it. True wealth isn't what makes you look powerful. It's what lets you sleep without pretending. It's the ability to wake up and know that your time belongs to you, that your value isn't on lease from anyone's approval. Veblen once wrote that every civilization creates its own form of servitude. Ours just happens to be polished, digital, and self-inflicted. But servitude loses its power the moment you stop performing for it. The moment you build a life that no longer depends on applause. Money can buy the signs of freedom, but only self-knowledge can buy the experience of it. That's the truth hidden beneath Veblen's theory, the one few dare to face. The paradox of modern life is that you can be richer than kings and still feel poor, because wealth without peace is just another form of debt. And the only way out is not to earn more, but to need less. If you want to go deeper into this, I'll be doing a full breakdown of Veblen's original ideas and how they shaped thinkers like Hirsch and Frank. Comment deep if you want to see that next. And remember, the system profits when you're restless. Real power begins the moment you're still. If this made you see the world a little clearer, stay, think deeper. This is ThinkMate.